Now, the four Indo-Pacific leaders of the Quad grouping vowed to stand together for a free and open Indo-Pacific region at the much-anticipated Quad summit, at a time when relations between four democracies and China remains tense. Now, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, US President Joe Biden, newly elected Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese were all welcomed by host and Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. The leaders posed for a photo op before their opening remarks, where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that the Quad had achieved a significant place on the world stage in a short amount of time.
क्वाड समूह ने विश्व पटल पर एक महत्वपूर्ण स्थान बना लिया है। आज क्वाड का स्कोप व्यापक हो गया है और स्वरूप प्रभावी हो गया है। हमारा आपसी विश्वास, हमारा डिटर्मिनेशन लोकतांत्रिक शक्तियों को नई ऊर्जा और उत्साह दे रहा है। क्वाड के स्तर पर हमारे आपसी सहयोग से एक फ्री, ओपन और इंक्लूसिव इंडो पैसिफिक क्षेत्र को प्रोत्साहन मिल रहा है, जो हम सभी का साझा उद्देश्य है।
Steady and enduring partner in the Indo-Pacific. We are an Indo-Pacific. We are an Indo-Pacific power. I was once asked by, well, I won't go into it, but I was once asked by the leader of China why I kept talking about being an Indo-Pacific power. I said, because we are. We share the Pacific, one entire side of our country. And we have been deeply involved with all of you for a long time.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the fallout of the ongoing situation, also found a prominent mention in the leaders' remarks. President Biden said that the crisis in Ukraine, it's a global issue, not a regional one. According to sources, India was also praised by Quad members on its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. US President Joe Biden drew a parallel between India's success with China's failure and praised India for handling its COVID outbreak in a democratic manner. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese also said that vaccines supplied by India to other countries was what made a difference on the ground, and such actions are more valuable than winning theoretical debates. Climate change was also on the agenda. Australian Prime Minister pledged that his country would attain net zero emissions by the year 2050.
We will act in recognition that climate change is the main economic and security challenge for the island countries of the Pacific. Under my government, Australia will set a new target to reduce emissions by 43% by 2030, putting us on track for net zero by 2050.
And joining us live for more on this is WION's managing editor Palki Sharma Upadhyay from Tokyo. Palki, thank you for joining us. Now, Japanese Prime Minister Kishida, Australian Prime Minister Albanese lauded India's vaccine initiative. US President Joe Biden also has hailed Prime Minister Modi's handling of the pandemic. Can you just take us through the key takeaways from the Quad summit? Palki, I was asking you that Japan's Prime Minister Kishida, Australian Prime Minister, they've all lauded India's vaccine initiative, and also US President Joe Biden hailed Prime Minister Modi's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you take us through all the big developments and the key takeaways from the Quad summit?
Sure. The biggest takeaway, of course, like you mentioned, was all the leaders praising India's vaccine diplomacy. And according to sources, Joe Biden also in some unscripted comments comparing India's COVID response to that of China's response, which he's said to have called a failure, and saying that democracy delivers while autocracy does not. But this is by way of sources. On the record, we know that some serious discussions have taken place on cybersecurity, climate action, supply chain resilience, disaster response, And the initiative that we've been telling our viewers about for the past few days has also been launched, the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness, IPMDA, which will allow tracking of illegal activity in the high seas. And this is an effort that is directly aimed at containing China's expansionist moves in the waters here. So that is without sort of naming China as they always do. They have taken a step in that direction. The Prime Minister of India calling the Quad a force for the good. He said that the agenda is constructive, that the impact has deepened and the scope has widened in the last couple of years. All three leaders also had a chance to meet. Australia's new Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Some jokes also went around with Joe Biden saying that since you've had such a hectic time, you fought an election, were on the campaign trail, got elected, were sworn in, took a flight and came here. So if you fall asleep, that's okay. Russia, of course, was mentioned, and the US president said that this is not just a European problem, it's a global problem. The Australian Prime Minister on his part saying that his government is, and I'm quoting, committed to working with your countries. The new Australian government gives priority to taking action on climate change and building a more resilient Indo-Pacific region. Now I want to draw the attention of our viewers to what the local press or the press in the region has been saying. Some very interesting commentary coming on India's role, and this is from the Nikkei Asia. It says that drawing India into anything approaching an alliance to contain China will never work because Delhi traditionally prizes its non-aligned status, which is very significant, I think. It is dawning on all of India's partners in the East and the West that an alliance is something that India is sort of wary of. India works well with partnerships. India prizes its strategic autonomy very much, and it can work with different players on different issues, issues that India feels strongly about. So that is a very important thing, and that's something that the Japanese Prime Minister also sort of acknowledged when asked about India's stand on Russia. So that was the fear that these countries, which had all joined the Western-backed sanctions regime against Russia, will try to hijack the Quad agenda. But I think India has been able to firmly state its point.
Right, absolutely, Palki. Also, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral talks with US President Joe Biden, also currently holding talks with Australian Prime Minister. Then he has a bilateral lined up with Japanese Prime Minister Kishida as well. Now, what can you tell us in terms of scope of further cooperation with the various members in India's position in the Quad?
This, like you know, is Prime Minister Modi's first in-person meeting with the US President after the war in Ukraine broke out. So this was an opportunity, like I've been saying, to iron out some of the differences. The US has put a fair bit of pressure on India to back sanctions or at the very least stop buying Russian oil, and India has not relented. So I think this was a good chance to sit across the table and to discuss all of that. None of it has made it to the official statements that have come in so far. They have spoken about their partnership, they've spoken about India's vaccine diplomacy and so on and so forth. So Biden, like I said, also compared India's response to that of China. The India-US partnership remains very strong, and that's something that both the leaders focused on. The second meeting was, of course, with the new Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Again, an opportunity to meet a new leader, because Prime Minister Modi's equation with the former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison was also very strong, and the fact that the new Prime Minister has wasted no time and was sworn in record time to come here and attend the Quad Summit goes on to show how seriously and sincerely he would like to approach this alliance.
Right. And also, Palki, you spoke to former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe a short while ago. Can you tell us the key takeaways from that discussion?
I think it was a very important interview on a day when 4 Quad leaders were holding a meeting barely a few hundred meters away. We were sitting with the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, who's called the original architect of the Quad. In 2006, he pushed for the Quad to be revived after the grouping had sort of disintegrated post the tsunami, and said that there is a need for democracies in the region to come together for a larger purpose and to uphold shared values. And so we sat down today, and he said some very interesting things about President Biden's comments yesterday on Taiwan. President Biden said that America remains committed to defending Taiwan in case China invades. The White House was quick to say that there is no change in the US's Taiwan policy. But according to former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, there is clearly a shift, and the statement from Joe Biden was by design, and he intended to sort of send a signal to all the players in the region. So that was interesting. He also spoke about China's ambitions in the region and how a military misadventure vis-a-vis Taiwan cannot be ruled out. He said that the Chinese regime may also be trying to engineer some sort of political instability in Taiwan. So very, very strong statements. He once again reiterated his demand or his suggestion to host American nuclear missiles in Japan. And that's again very, very significant because Japan has had a pacifist constitution, the only country in the world to have been hit by a nuclear bomb. And for a former prime minister and a very tall political leader to push for a nuclear base in the country and say that nuclear deterrence is what you need is quite a shift. So some very interesting and important points being made, and we'll play out the full interview later this evening for our viewers.
Right, absolutely. Valki, thank you so much for joining us with all the updates. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.